extensive research to ensure that these videos are evidence-based and as factual as possible, there's still a handful of things that just don't add up to me. Stuff that's like moments in time throughout Harry and Meghan's saga, or things that they have done, the Megxit storm, and the slow slip into obscurity that has continued to this day. There's a handful of things that just still puzzle me, that don't seem to have solid logic behind them, at least not in the way that Harry and Meghan have tried to justify or explain or present these things. Like, for example, Harry and Meghan being super weird and secretive about Archie's birth and the 2-week comment. Or why Meghan claims to this day that she told Harry she was having a crisis. Or the GMPs. What is happening with the giant man pants? Why did she think this was a good idea ever? Why? These things just still fully don't make sense to me, no matter how much I try to give them the benefit of the doubt and take their word for it or their version of events. It still isn't logical, especially this. So today I wanted to dig deeper into one specific festering issue. This claim of a crisis of mental wellness that was claimed by the Meg on Oprah. Because I recently had a thought about this claim that actually ties it directly to the royal staff bullying complaint against Meghan Markle. And so I have brought tea. But before we get into it, I would like to invite you to subscribe if you have not yet already. Click like and hype this video if you wish. Let's get into it. If we ignore the South Africa "nobody asked me if I'm okay" thing, and we just focus on what she said during the Oprah manipulation marathon, this was the moment. This picture right here, this was the moment that Meghan Markle had told Prince Harry that she was having a rough go of it in terms of mental health, which we're just going to call the crisis for simplicity of the video. What she said this day was that she had finally given in and told Harry that she was having very serious mental health crisis, that she was just super low, that she wanted to end everything. She didn't think that she would be safe being left home alone. And instead of Harry using his therapist on speed dial, allegedly, or, doing anything, they emailed HR. He let her email HR, which doesn't even make sense. Royal household human resources is for the staff that work for the royal family. Meghan was a member of the royal family, so that was not a correct avenue, which is exactly why I did not think this made sense from the start. But look at these pictures. Look at what we have here. We have Meghan smiling like normal, hamming it up in a way when she's talking to folks, touching Harry as she does every time he shakes hands with someone. She lays her hand on his back or his arm or his elbow, or refuses to not hold hands. We see her looking relatively normal here. When they make it to their seats, she smiles like normal. Like, all of this looks very, very normal to me. If anything, it looks like Harry's a little bit irritated or cranky. And so when I look at these pictures and I'm trying to view them through the perspective that Meghan set forth in Oprah, it doesn't add up to me, like, at all. None of this, to me, matches the story that Meghan told on Oprah, that she was so low and so upset and, this was rough, a rough day. When she disclosed to Harry how bad she was feeling and they emailed HR. Like, really, 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 really rough, right? But here, like, this picture, what is this? This is not congruous with that. This doesn't feel like it matches that. Here you see Harry looks irritated as all get out. That doesn't match it. So looking at these pictures, leave in the comments now. Do you think on the surface that these photographs match the version of events that Meghan told Oprah? It's just never really made sense to me, because when I saw this news in real time, this was January 16th, 2019, and they went to Cirque du Soleil. I think it was at Royal Albert Hall, I think. And it just never made sense to me, because when I saw this news in 2019, I thought, looking at the pictures, that it looked like they had just had a fight. I thought it looked like we had Meghan acting normal, smiling, keeping up the appearances, and Harry looks like he's struggling to hide his displeasure from having just had an argument. That's just what it looked like to me at the time. My opinion, okay? It looks like he's fed up and straight up irritated. So I've always thought it looked like Meghan had made a stink before the event, and at the time, my theory initially fit into the narcissistic playbook that a lot of people are very familiar with. People who tend to be very high in narcissism will oftentimes pick a fight with their significant other before an event or a party or an important day or a holiday or a birthday. Sometimes it's right before, sometimes it's a day or two before, but a lot of times this happens. This is kind of something that people who have dealt with relationships like this are accustomed to dealing with, or familiar with, I guess we could say. At the time, the public was fully aware that the Sussexes were struggling to keep staff. At that point, there had been a steady rotation of experienced senior staff leaving very quickly after coming on to the Sussexes team. And Meghan had also, by this point, had quite a few public fumbles. The press had had a lot of leaks from people close to the situation, explaining that Meghan was being perceived as extremely difficult by those who had to be around her. The Duchess difficult headlines were already running by this point. And so that also sort of fit my theory at the time of like somebody high in narcissism manufacturing conflict before an event and the other person feeling disappointment, confusion, sort of apathetic towards it, because it's hard to enjoy something after somebody does that. So that was kind of my theory at the time. And I still sort of think this looks like that. Like still, when I'm just like thinking about it from a purely opinion perspective. But regardless of that theory, I still can't take these pictures and make them fit into the box of Meghan's version of events. Like, I just can't see these working that way. If Meghan's version of events was true, we would expect to see Harry being like hypervigilant towards her, treating her with exceptional care. We would expect to see him sort of babying her, or maybe he's touching her back and hand and sort of gracefully guiding her around. We would expect to see him being very tender, perhaps looking a little bit worried, but also maybe we would see him looking reassured if she's smiling or something of that nature. I would also expect to see Meghan behaving more sheepishly, perhaps a little bit quieter or less assertive, if what she had said on Oprah was true. But we don't get that in these pictures, like at all. We see her being assertive, pushing in front of Harry to greet people, which isn't necessarily a stringent rule, but it is not the standard with royalty. She's acting the same as she typically does. Unnecessary gestures, instructing Harry regularly on where to go, sort of pestering him. Harry looks irritated, not concerned. Meghan looks her typical assertive self, you know? I also cannot find any pictures that show what Meg claimed of the whites of their knuckles from gripping each other so tightly were visible. I don't see any white knuckling in these pictures at all. Like, where? But the plot thickens. Just 3 months before this date, Jason Knopf, who had a brief stint as the Sussexes' secretary, had emailed Prince William privately to disclose concerns for how Meghan Markle had been treating her staff. And at the time, this was kept private, which is telling in and of itself. Jason wanted to ensure human resource protection for specific staff, presumably because he was concerned Meghan Markle would seek to manipulate the situation or retaliate. While Meghan and Harry were not made aware of the email, possibly at the request of the staff who were negatively impacted by Meghan Markle for fear of retaliation, The Sussexes would have, without a doubt, known about the obvious problems with their staff, their inability to keep staff. Harry specifically mentioned that he saw people crying at their desks regularly. It was no secret to anybody, Meghan and Harry included, that staff was unhappy at the time. And it's not uncommon in situations like these for the person at fault or the aggressor to seek to establish a counter-narrative to protect their reputation. The alleged HR email and the story they told Oprah may very well have been an attempt to corroborate or make an excuse or a counter-narrative to the staff's negative experiences and complaints against Meghan. When we view this through that lens, it does maketh more sense. In this theory, following repeated challenges and tense exchanges with staff, Meghan would have become aware of the fact that a reputation was developing, and it wasn't a good one. Consequences may have even begun to materialize behind the scenes. And so at this point, Meghan deployed defensive maneuvers. Emailing HR and claiming mental wellness struggles around this time provides an excuse for her behavior earlier. In the eyes of a toxic person or someone high in narcissism, a crisis absolves them of responsibility for mean treatment of someone or staff. It provides an adequate pass, and it wipes the slate clean in her eyes. Possibly, potentially, in this theory. And the story she told on Oprah may very well have coincided with the date of this appearance and the email that she had sent to HR, allegedly. So maybe she chose this date retroactively to coincide with the email to HR and thought that because she said it in a televised interview, that it adequately corroborated her story and excuses her behavior and created a new fact. This could also explain why she was so upset, allegedly, at finding out that there was an official complaint made by Jason 3 months prior on behalf of the staff against Meghan Markle, which became public right before the Oprah interview aired, which she at the time claimed was a calculated smear campaign. But that doesn't really make sense, the smear campaign angle, because these were old. The email that leaked was over 2 years old at that point. So if this theory is true, what it actually did was discredit her crisis claims on Oprah, because regardless of the email that she sent to HR, it is highly irregular for someone who is genuinely dealing with severe depression or a severe mental health crisis to be actively tormenting people around them and their staff at the same time. So this email and this history of bullying complaints within the royal staff circles coming to light right before Meghan tried to create this narrative to excuse her behaviors and sort of absolve her of responsibility for being a difficult person to work with, was undermined by the emails predating that. Even if we look at it from a slightly less toxic perspective, even if we say, okay, maybe Meghan wasn't fully calculating, I need to make a counter narrative here. High profile, experienced aides were quitting back to back. It was public and it was plain for everyone, including the Sussexes, to see. And in any standard workplace, when somebody, a boss, sees a pattern of high turnover and visible distress, they know that a narrative is forming. It's common sense. And naturally, when someone senses that they're going to be framed as the bad guy in a situation, people want to clear their name. So how do you do that when the press is already running headlines like Duchess Difficult? You reframe the crisis. If Meghan felt that she was simply a driven, high-achieving American corporate boss met with lazy, passive-aggressive institutional resistance, then the staff's unhappiness wasn't her fault, it was the institution's fault. By going to HR in January 2019 to report her own profound isolation and severe mental health struggles, she wasn't just asking for help. She was establishing a powerful, deeply personal counter-narrative. It positioned her not as the aggressor in the palace, but as the primary victim of it. This theory doesn't require us to believe that Meghan was calculating a fake crisis. In fact, it could be much simpler. It allows for two overlapping realities to exist at the same time. The staff were genuinely miserable, culturally shocked, and felt managed by fear. And Meghan felt the need to defend herself or establish her own narrative that she was a pregnant, deeply isolated woman under unprecedented media attack, feeling a total lack of institutional support. When those two realities collided, the HR department became the ultimate battleground for who got to write the history of that office. Was it a toxic boss or a toxic system? When put that way, this is an example of how far someone will go to protect their own narrative when the walls start closing in. The bottom line, however, is that if she was experiencing an extreme crisis during that time, it becomes nearly impossible for the palace or people to hold her accountable for her actions in the same way that they would have otherwise. But to me, because the pictures don't match Meghan's version of events, and given everything that we do know, and the patterns we do have established of the difficult boss narratives that have continued since she left the royal family, I personally do think that it makes a lot of sense that this was done in an attempt to create a reputation-saving or reputation triage counter-narrative within the palace institution, and once Oprah came around to corroborate that or to sort of bring it forth and make it more valid by way of having it, discussed in a televised interview, makes a lot of people assume it is a fact when it is not. It is just an account or a version of events, but regardless of that, was an attempt to absolve her of responsibility for her behaviors in the past and sort of get out ahead of any potential negative feedback about her time working with royal staff. But what do you think is most likely true? That she purposefully tried to create excuses for her behavior, or was less calculated and just establishing a counter narrative of like there are two sides to a story? What do you think? What vibe do you get from these pictures?